Alright, guys, so today we're going to venture into American Romanticism as a movement of literature in the early to mid 1800s. Just to make one thing clear, when I say Romanticism, I am not discussing sappy love stories that you might originally imagine when you think of Romanticism. So, Romanticism was a literary movement that began in the early 1800s as, in a sense, a revolt against the literary voice and traditions of Europe. So, if you consider the Revolutionary War as a time when America asserted its independence from England physically and as a country, the Romanticism period is a time when American writers asserted their independence from Europe in terms of literary structures and traditions. And so, this is the moment when we look for the true American voice in literature. If you think about literature in terms of the continuum of American history, during the Puritan period, literature was not read for fun. There was no fiction. It was all about faith and what could bring us closer to God. And I think we saw that in Hawthorne and the Scarlet Letter and the image he presented of Puritanism, right? Very much focused on salvation and sin and all of that. As we moved into the 1700s, we entered a period what's known as the Age of Reason, and that became focused on the role of science and logic in our life. And so literature to this point was not fiction as well. Here, anything that was written was more instructional, informative, expository, instructing others how they can do something, how they can make their town or city or home better. If you remember, before we started the Scarlet Letter, we read something by Ben Franklin from his autobiography about virtues. You know, that's a perfect example of literature during the Age of Reason. It stressed logic and instructions, right? So if you remember, Ben Franklin gave us his logical way that he was going to get better on the 13 virtues. But now we move into Romanticism, and this is the first time when reading for fun, reading for pleasure became part of the American culture. And Romanticism specifically stresses this idea of feelings over logic. So you see the continuum. We've moved from God over logic, logic over faith, and now feelings over logic. So what's going on in America at this time? So obviously the end of the Revolutionary War left everyone with this great sense of optimism. And hey, wahoo, you know, we're free, we can do our own thing, we're our own country. But what's significantly important during the period of Romanticism is how the country expanded. So if we start with the Louisiana Purchase and then look at the California Gold Rush, the country moved from New England all the way out to California. You know, the Louisiana Purchase effectively doubled the size of the country with that purchase from France, and then the Gold Rush opened us up even further. So now, not only do you have the Gold Rush, you have the start of the Intercontinental or the Transcontinental Railroad, and the imagination of people began to run wild, and the idea of the frontier and the unexplored wilderness began to be really exciting. You know, what can we as Americans accomplish with all this great space, all this great land? What can we find? What can we do? How amazing this is. Let's go, let's explore, let's find all the greatness that is in our country. And so this, you know, this amazing acquisition of land, the gold rush, all led to this sense of wilderness and imagination and excitement within the American culture. So what are some of the characteristics of American Romanticism? And first and foremost is values feelings and intuition over reason. So while reason is important, while reason helps us do our everyday life and our tasks and our jobs effectively, literature is this time in this moment when we get in touch with who we are as a person, right? It's almost separate from our everyday life. We read literature that helps us connect with who we are as a person. And so it places faith in our inner experiences. What have we done? What have we experienced? What can we imagine? That's what's important. Not, here's how you do X, Y, and Z. And to do X, Y, and Z, you need to follow steps A, B, C, and D before you can start step X, right? Who are we? What have we experienced, and what is the power in that? Um, to simplify it, American Romanticism looked at cities as this place of artificiality, right? As this place of urban decay, of immoral behavior. Those who wrote in the American Romanticism period loved the countryside. They loved the unspoiled aspect of nature, how the wilderness and the farmland would just go on and on and on. In terms of God, right? So we talked about Puritanism was God over logic, then the Age of Reason was logic over faith. Romanticism there's still this belief in God, right? That hasn't been abandoned, but it's through nature that we find God. Being out in this rural area, and you look at this photo here, right? This is the epitome of Romanticism, the beauty of the landscape, of nature, of the untraversed wilderness, of what lies beyond the horizon that we can see and accomplish. Often the characteristics are summarized into the 5 eyes of Romanticism, and this is important, right? So the imagination, what is the active part of our soul? Let's write stories, poetry that really focuses on the imaginations and stirs our imagination to work in ways that it hasn't before. Idealism is huge. Romantic stories, poems, all for the most part have a sense of utopia. How can we create a better, more perfect world through our actions, through our stories? Intuition, feelings are important. And guys, this is where I think Romanticism is really significant, especially as male readers. We live in a society that says, hey, let's bottle up our emotions, let's not show our emotions, and let's just get through the day, right? And Romanticism is saying, no, our feelings are important. This is who we are, and we need to be in touch with our feelings and okay with that. Inspiration, finding the divine. Again, in Romanticism, it would be mostly through nature, but also in ourselves and in others. Where do we find the divine? And then finally, who are we as individuals? Who are we collectively as Americans? If you remember at the beginning of this presentation, I talked about Romanticism as finding or revolting from the European literary tradition. So who are we uniquely? What does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to be John Smith in American society? And those are the 5 eyes that, as we look at these stories we'll read over the next week or two, we'll begin to see that. So nature, right? Nature is clearly a significant aspect of Romanticism. If you think of that picture a few slides ago of the beautiful sunset, the red sky, the mountain, Romantics viewed nature as powerful and beautiful, but they also respected nature in so much as they realized the tremendous power of nature to inflict harm, whether through a storm or a fire or an earthquake or flood or whatever. Nature has good and bad, and as such, nature must be respected. We can find freedom in nature, we can find quiet and confidence in nature, but we can also find a significant danger in nature, and so we must not mistreat nature, abuse nature. So as we read our stories, we'll see the role of nature pretty significantly in how it is viewed. Finally, in Romanticism, we got what is first known as the American hero. So we're familiar with superheroes and Marvel and the Avengers and blah blah blah, X-Men, Spider-Man, Batman. The romantic hero was simply the common man. Humans who were naturally good, who were young, who were innocent, who had a strong sense of honor, who wanted to find out the higher truth of the world. These were the first American heroes. Right? They were not our image of these strong muscle men who were creating or participating in great feats. The original American hero was just a simple, good, not corrupted person who was on a journey to figure out the higher truth in life. And so this image here James Fenimore Cooper wrote this novel called Leather Stockings, and this was actually considered the first hero of American literature. And we're actually going to start our romantic period with the dark romantics, who, if you think of those five eyes, the one, idealism, they disagreed with. They disagreed that the world is this great place that we want to make better. They believed that humans were dark. We had a sinister core. They believed more in the destructive power of nature than the beauty of nature. But they believed that ultimately the bad in society balanced the good in society. So with every good action, there was a bad action. And of course, the most famous of the dark romantics is Edgar Allan Poe, who's very apropos for October. Nathaniel Hawthorne is a dark romantic. The Scarlet Letter is actually a perfect example of dark romanticism, if you think about how he focused on the bad, right? How he focused on the sin, how he focused on the evil in humanity in terms of Chillingworth or Dimmesdale not having the courage to confess his sin for 7 years. So we're going to start our journey with the dark romantics. We've left Hawthorne. We're going to move into some Poe, Washington Irving, and then we'll move into some of the quote-unquote lighter romantics that like idealism. So guys, thanks for hanging along with this video. Tomorrow in class we'll discuss these five eyes, we'll review, we'll make sure we're all on the same page, and then we'll get started with our readings.